muted. How Live Q&A session with Fab Dupont. My name is Mark Abrams. I'm going to be moderating today. You guys sent in questions from all over the world. We had a ton of responses and really, really great questions. So we're going to dig right in. So everybody say hello to Fab. Here's Fab. Cool. All right. So Fab is in New York City at Flux Studios right now. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. It's very cold here. And our first question comes from an even colder place. This is from Janice in Riga in Latvia. And the question is, there are many great stories of how people have developed their careers back in the day, when you could walk around studios knocking on the door. How do you get out to mix or produce for the greats today? How do you prove your skills and make those skills known to clients?
Well, there are two questions in this. At the risk of sounding brash, which happens from time to time, the connection between skills and being successful is not always correlated. But there are several things you have to consider. To make the connections, to be able to go up in the business, is basically about people. So you got to meet people, which I personally always sucked at. So I never really went out to meet people. I just stayed in my basement, and I made, records after records after records after records, and that's not the way to do it. I did it the wrong way. So I do benefit from my mistakes. The way to do it is to go out and listen to music and meet people where music's made. The easiest is to go to shows. Go see bands you like at shows, introduce yourself, network, basically. So of course that's kind of difficult because, it's like, hey, how you doing? That was a great set. And then what do you say? So it's a skill that you have to develop over time. I personally never been good at it. So I wasted a lot of time basically waiting for the quality of my work to make a name for itself, and then people will call me. And then these days it's going to be mostly chance. Like we are working with somebody right now to bring a new mentor on PureMix, and he did a lot of work with a very famous band when they were nothing. So he was a local band, and he helped them record the first record the best they could, and then nothing happened. Then he did the second record, and that one blew up. And then since they're good people, when they made the third record, they called him again, and now he's working with Depeche Mode. So basically that curve is like work around you and let people grow. For me, what happened, let me see what happened. I moved to New York City. I made a record, made a couple records for myself as an artist. Shopped it to the labels the best I could, using any resource I had, sending it out. Nothing came out of that. Used the service, and something came out of that. And I talked to the guys at Interscope because they were interested in knowing who made that record. So I talked to them. In the end, they never signed me, but they did send me work, saying, hey, we're not going to sign you, but we like the way you produce records. So would you like to try one song for this guy? So that's one way I got in, by having an artist career and failing at it. And then it resulted in my day job making records for other people while I was still trying to have a career as an artist. Another way it happened is while I was in New York City in my basement, somebody would come in and bring a track, and I'd love the track. And they'd say, we have $8 for the mix. And if I loved the track, I said yes. And then some of those people would always come back and have $8 for the mix. And then the better people would come back and say, look, you did me a favor last time. I'm now doing the Jennifer Lopez record. Would you like to work on it? So that's another way. It's all based on your close circle of people. What you have to understand, and I hear that a lot, it's like, it's a very close circuit, and it's a very close circle, and nobody can get in. And yeah, I mean, if you're in a position where you're high pressure, say, for example, you're A&R at a label, right? And your boss, and you make a lot of money. But a lot of money is based on you not screwing up, right? And your boss puts a lot of pressure on you. Are you going to take a chance on somebody you don't know? No. Think about your circle of friends. How many people in your circle of friends would you trust with a $200,000 budget? See? So these people work with a circle of people that they know are not going to fuck up. And so the circle of people that are not going to fuck up is not that big. So, so if they're going to do a high pressure record in the style of a record I've done before, they're going to call me because they know that I'll die before I deliver a record that's not good, right? And they won't call you because they don't know you. And if they know you, they don't know that you won't die, that you will, basically kill yourself before you deliver a bad record yet. So that it's not that close a circle, It's just people do business with 1 degree of separation because they know the people, they trust the people, they can handle the pressure. And also, if you recommend somebody and somebody fails, then it's your fault. So that's happened to me quite a bit, where like I take a chance on somebody and say, I can't do this mix right now, or I can't produce this song right now. Do you want to do it? And I connect somebody else, and that person fails. And so who do you think gets the bad phone call? That person? No, I get the bad phone call because I recommend somebody who failed. So it's very difficult to extend the circle of influence, and it's very difficult to basically get into the circle by just showing up and saying, I'm badass. That's not going to happen. What you have to do is you have to prove you're badass, and you have to have a whole bunch of people who know you're badass, who trust you, and then as they grow, you grow with them. But you're not going to go from 0 to Rihanna with 1 phone call. That's never going to happen. It takes 10 years, 15 years, and that's the way it is, because it takes that long to create a circle of trust, if that makes sense. And then you have to be good too. That's the other part of it. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, great question.
All right.
Great answer there. All right, the next one's really, really fun.
Okay.
This is from Chris in France, and he wants to know...
Those French people.
He wants to know what your worst memory is during a recording session and why.
Oh, I have a lot of bad ones. Worst memory. I don't know. You're recording David Crosby and the console dies. That sucks. You're 2 hours into a session that's 12 hours and you've been lied to, and the singer does suck. That's bad. Oh, I have a good one. Okay, I was doing this. I was doing this favor. It's always when you do favors. I was doing this favor for somebody who had lost his very high-level job at a jazz label that I will not name, Warner, and that then subsequently asked me to help him get into the good graces on another label I will not name, Verve, and I said sure because he had done me a favor. I thought he had done me a favor, but the reality is I had done him a favor, but that's always a question of point of view. So anyway, I felt indebted to the man. So I said, sure, man, whatever you need. So he said, I have this session. It's really low cost, but it's great players, and it's a great singer, and it's, it's cool Brazilian music, and you'll dig it. And so I said yes. And so it turned out that the singer was kind of an over-the-hill daughter of somebody rich, who had somehow ingratiated herself with the favors of the label, of the owner of the label, or the director of the label, and somehow had finagled her way into financing her own development deal with that label. So basically, somebody at the label did not have the balls to tell her that she sucked. And somebody at that label put that straight into my friend's lap, who then put it straight into my lap. So you can see the situation. So they did hire really good players. And so here we are in what the embryo that was Flux before Flux was Flux. And I'm with this like 3 players in this singer. And she was a basket case. She was really not able to keep herself together because she was really worried, and she had some serious mental issues. And so we tracked, the whole point is that she wanted it to be real, and she wanted it to be true, and she wanted it to be pure. And I'm like, 3 of my specialties, let's do it. So I set the band up, and I set her up in the booth. I had 1 booth, everybody else was in the big live room. And we do a first take, and she's unable to sing the song. Like literally, she forgets lyrics, she sings the wrong melody. It was awful. And now we have some very highly paid high-fly New York A-prime jazz players who are not necessarily the most diplomatic human beings in the universe. I am supposedly only engineering. The producer, who I was doing a favor for, was sitting on the couch reading the New York Times when I'm managing this mess. And so we do one take and she fails. We do a second take and she fails. And the guys are just crushing it because they're one takers. We're on the third take, and the guitar player starts saying things like, you know, I think my take before was just great. You know, you guys can just overdub whatever you need to overdub. And she starts saying that she doesn't overdub. And I'm like, well, you know, the track is ready and it's beautiful. You can just sing over the track. And you know, that's done. And she said, well, no, nobody does that. I'm like, yeah, some people do that. The whole like overdubbing over a track, it happens. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So she kept the musicians in there for like 6 hours playing the same song, which they nailed the first time. So we did like 30 takes, and every time she would fuck up something somewhere, not sing or something. At one point, probably when the New York Times was done being read on the couch, I heard a little voice saying, maybe we should overdub the vocal. And I'm like, dude,
Jeez.
where have you been all my life? So after much tractation, we managed to convince this lady to break the rules and just compromise on her artistic vision and overdub her vocal, since she couldn't sing the freaking song. And so here we are 6 or 7 hours into the session, and the musicians are going. They hate my guts because, of course, you know, they can't hate the client, so they have to hate someone. It's my guts. And then we start the overdubbing session. And that's when we discovered that this lady will not punch in. So she would not overdub for 6 hours, and now she decided she was not going to punch in. So we had to try and take one full take of the song without failure, and that was very hard. And I'm going to break the news to you. About 2 hours down the line, or 3 hours down the line, she still wasn't able to sing the song. She always has something that she screwed up or she didn't like. And then that's when we discovered when there was one semi-acceptable take where I said, look, this is good. You got the song. You got the song. And she said, well, I'm flat on the chorus there. I said, that's no problem. I can tune it. And she said, I don't tune. And that you think is science fiction. No, it happens. No longer to me, fortunately, but it does happen to people. So yeah, that was one horrible session. I remember that.
Actually, can you kind of elaborate on that? I mean, what do you do to kind of calm everybody down when they're freaking out and the session's just
that's
headed
easy.
downhill?
It's not your record. It's their record, right? She doesn't want to overdub. She doesn't want to overdub. So there's a funny point there. You know, there's a point where it becomes so stupid that it goes below your standards of self-respect. So it gets below your self-respect, then that's when I personally just try and guide people through reason. The whole concept of like reason and common sense are extremely underrated in our business. I'm a Zen dude. I see everybody's point of view. I really understand everybody's point of view. I'm 100% in sync. This woman, you know, she probably listened to Billie Holiday and she somehow convinced herself that Billie Holiday did not overdub, which is probably true. And she thought that Billie Holiday didn't punch in, and that's probably true. And I can guarantee you that Billie Holiday did not tune. However, Billie Holiday did sing out of tune from time to time and didn't bother her. And also, Billie Holiday was a badass, and this lady was not. So you can't tell someone who's emotionally distraught that they're not badass. That's never yielded anything great. So you can always guide people towards a better solution. Like, for example, going home at one point today with something. And in this case, I said, look, I told her, I said, look, I work with some of the greatest vocalists on earth. And I haven't done a record in years where at least something was tuned, because we love the performance, but there's this one technical problem, and we fixed that. And I would explain, they used to cut in different pieces of tape together to make a song, and at the very beginning, people would tune with an H3000. They didn't have Melodyne or Autotune, but they would tune with an H3000. It would sound awful, but it would do it. And that one, it didn't work for that one. It just ended in nervous breakdown and tears. And I just went and bought some red wine and some chocolate. And I went in the booth with her, and I sat down with her in the booth. I said, look, music's hard. Let's do it again after you've chilled out, and then I'll comp something together. And then she said, I don't comp. I was like, no, you don't have to comp. I'll comp. And then in this case, I have to say it never happens, but in this particular case, I lied. I said, why don't you do one last take? Just one last take. Have some wine, chill. Whenever you're ready, do one last take. At this time, it's probably 10 p.m. Her voice sounds like she's been screaming all day, which she has. And we did the whole take. And she came in the control room and she said, how was that? And I said, it was amazing. And you should go to bed, chill, and come back in the morning. I'll play you the take, and I think you're going to love it. And then when she left, I comped and tuned the shit out of everything we did during the day and played it for her in the morning, and she was delighted. Don't forget, it's not your record. Mm-hmm. Unless it's your record. But if it's not your record, then it's not your record. You're helping people get to where they want to be. So you got to remove your ego from it. I get a lot of stories from people saying, well, man, we were mixing with this guy and he didn't want to do that and he didn't want to do this. And I'm like, why? Like, did you explain the artistic vision between what you want? I mean, it's like, you want no bass on the record. Okay, why? And if there's a good reason why you want no bass on the record, fine, make a record with no bass. But putting yourself in the way of the artistic vision of the people you work with is dumb. The other thing that's dumb, of course, is doing something that is awful and let them fail. So this is a very difficult balance, but you got to learn how to read people, which is half of the job, right? So you have to understand, where are they sensible? Where are they stupid? Can you meet them in the middle? Not for you, for them. How can you be of best help to them so that they get a better record? It's a tough one. I never thought about that. It's difficult. It's a relationship. It's a short-term relationship. It's like a short-term marriage with a guaranteed divorce, right? So you have to enjoy the process of the marriage part, because there's going to be a divorce, and you have to make sure that those X days, hours, weeks are the best days, hours, weeks possible, knowing that they're going to end. And so what does that entail? And what's your end goal? Your end goal is for them to be happy and for the product to reflect well on them and on you, but mostly on them, really. Because you'll never listen to that record again. Mm-hmm. You're too busy making another one. Next question, boss.
I'm going to make sure that ends up in a book somewhere. Making a record is like a short-term marriage with a guaranteed divorce. Fab Dupont.
Yes, let's put that on the launch, on the launch of pureMix. It's true.
Yeah.
When you make a record, you're best friends with the artist. And it's true, because you spend 10, 12 hours a day. It's high pressure, lots of tension, lots of satisfaction. It's like your best friends, right? And then the record ends, and then you don't hear from them for until they make another record, if they call you again. It's really weird at the beginning. You're like, whoa. And then you see, you go hang out. There's a couple artists you stay close friends with, if they live in your neighborhood. But if not, they're on tour. You're not going to see them for 2 years. It's really weird. It's a weird thing. Like, you have this really close relationship with somebody, and then void. And then somebody else comes in. There's a slight prostitution quality to it, I'd say. Mm-hmm. All right, what else you got, boss?
Cool. Okay, so our next question's from Elmo in New Orleans.
Hi, Elmo. How you doing? I loved that crawfish boil last week.
Nice. He actually sent in a session for you to check out with the hazardous recording thing that we're going to talk about later.
Bananas.
So we have a session for you. Okay, so Elmo asks, what is the deal with normalization environments, streaming services, LUFS, and whatnot? Can you give me the rundown? Will I need my mastering engineer to create multiple sets of masters to have my mixes sound uniform across streaming platforms?
How many days do you have?
Right.
So there's a big shakedown going on right now, and I am analyzing currently daily analyzing the output of all the streaming services with a big focus on Spotify and YouTube. And I'm finding out what's really going on. I don't have the final answers because I'm in the middle of it. But what can I tell you is that what's being advertised is not real for a change. So maybe they're born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline, but it's not what they say it is. So I will have more thorough answer on that no later than very soon or a little bit after that. But what I can tell you is this. The streaming services normalize, they do. I have the great privilege of having songs that I've mastered myself. I have the mastered file on my desktop, and then I have the file on Spotify and the file on YouTube, so I can compare all three. That's very educational. So yeah, they do normalize. Spotify normalizes in the region of minus 14 LUFS. YouTube normalizes in the region of minus 13 LUFS. LUFS is a new standard that's been devised to replace your average RMS level. That is more of a psychoacoustic standard where you actually take into account the frequency range as opposed to just the electrical current, and is more accurate in theory. Having deeply delved into LUFS recently, yeah, it kind of does that. It's definitely more accurate to level 2 tracks using LUFS than it is using VUs, for example, and definitely peak meters. So your concern is the following. Do you master a record, especially for streaming, and then you do another version for a CD, and then you do another version for an LP? Do you master a CD especially for YouTube, especially for Spotify, because minus 13, minus 14, and then especially for Apple Music, minus 16, or especially for broadcast at minus 23? The jury is still out. What I can tell you from the people that I know, I work with, or other mastering engineers who master my records when I don't master them, they, and I'm going to be very technical, clearly don't give a fuck. So they just master the record for CD and everybody uses that. I have started mastering, especially for streaming. Happened to me last week. I mastered a record for a really great French artist, and I made very clear. It said name of song, name of artist, name of song, streaming, all caps. And I decided to master it so it sounds good and it doesn't get touched by YouTube. And then Spotify would bring it down 1 dB. I'm okay with 1 dB. And then I made another version, name of song, artist, CD, right? So there was one that said streaming and one that said CD. And this is a major label, international label. It has the words so and ni in it. So I'll let you fill in the blanks. There are no blanks. And so these are the professionals who decide who gets to listen to what and everything. And I can guarantee you that the file that ended up on YouTube, because it was for a video, was the CD file. So I called. I know it because the CD file, for me to make it fit -6, it was limited. And I'm watching the video, I'm hearing the song, and I'm like, why is the CD file on YouTube when I gave them a streaming file? So I called the A&R and I say, yo, why is the CD file? And he said, well, the streaming file was too quiet. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. Do you understand that they will take the CD file and bringing down to the level of the streaming file I gave you, and thus, instead of having all this dynamic, you're gonna have only this much dynamic, and you're leaving this much dynamic, and it's just not gonna sound as good. And he said, yeah, but it was quieter. I said, yeah, I understand it was quieter on your desktop, but do you understand that that's YouTube and Spotify and Tidal and Apple Music will take that very loud file and bring it down, and so that in the end, when he plays out of Spotify or YouTube, they will play at the same level, but the one that I made for streaming will actually sound better. And he said, yeah, but it was quieter. And I said, you did great. Have a wonderful day. And I moved on because they are that dumb. And so the thing is, Most people don't understand what's going on. Most mastering engineers have not updated because they send their stuff to labels and the guy at the label just thinks it's quieter. And that's bad. And then, so it's an absolute pig fuck right now. I would say it's going to take another 2-3 years for the major labels to understand that you don't have to crush music anymore. It's going to take 2-3 years for Spotify to actually get their shit together, because from what I'm reading right now, it's not all very equal. And also there's some back catalog that hasn't been done. So sometimes you have the level check stuff, you get blasted. So it's a mess. What I think and what I do is at all times, I make the best possible sounding stuff. So if I know that it's going to end up on Spotify and that I have 14 dBs of dynamic or even 13 dBs of dynamic, if I want to be one master for Spotify and YouTube, you know what I'll do? I'll make a 14 dB dynamic record, which, by the way, for modern music is pretty hard to do. Most records, if they have 10 dBs or 12 dBs of dynamic, it's like, whoo! I have been measuring Spotify, the entire output of modern music, and the most dynamic records I could find on Spotify are mine. It's really sad. Or classical music. Classical music will, knock you off your socks. But for modern pop music or folk music, the most dynamic records that I could find on Spotify were my records, which was extremely disappointing. Everything else is crushed like if it were going to a CD. And they're just being brought down. But that's going to change over time. So I make the best possible sounding record, and I deliver a version for streaming, and I deliver a version for CD. And as I just explained, most of the time, someone with serious self-esteem issues will use the CD version just because it's louder. And more power to them. There's a good version floating somewhere in the universe. Mm-hmm. Talk again in 1 year.
What are you using for metering while you're doing mixes? Checking your dynamic range and everything. How are you accomplishing that?
At this point, I'm using the dangerous peak over average meter. Mm-hmm. That's the best there is right now. There's some plugin options, but they're not great. So I use a peak over average meter, and yeah, somebody should come up with a better solution.
Cool. All right. Well, let's do the next question here. You got a ton of questions, by the way.
Great.
And we just announced this thing like 3 days ago, so it's pretty cool. Okay, so the next one's from Brian Burton, and he says, how do you feel confident doing a mix when you have to be in a different room on different speakers that you don't know? Like when you're in Peru.
This, and where is he? He's here. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. This. Because this never changes, right? So you got to find yourself a pair of headphones or several pairs of headphones that you trust. So I use the Focal Spheres and the Focal Spirit Pros. In Peru, when I was with Michael League, tracking the Susana Baca record, they had a pair of speakers of the brand called Monkey Banana, I kid you not, and a pair of Genelex, like 83s, the little pods like this. The surprising part is that I personally abhor those tiny Genelex. They sound broken to me. It's not that they sound bad, they sound definitely broken to me, to my personal taste. They're just an awful pair of speakers. The Monkey Bananas were not half as bad, so I went with the Monkey Bananas, plus they're, bananas. So, so I worked with that, but most of the time you could see me with my headphones on my head to make sure that the tones were right. But I was not mixing, I was tracking. If I were to mix in a situation where I don't know the room and I don't know the speakers, I would probably not get as good a mix as I do get here, because here is perfect and elsewhere is not. Not only is it perfect, but I'm used to perfect here. So if, say, for example, I just was mixing a big French rapper guy, and he didn't want to go into any studio that was well known in Paris, because he just didn't want to be around studios. He didn't want anybody to hear the music. He wanted to keep it secret until the last second. He didn't want the assistants to hear the music. He didn't want people to know he was making a record. He wanted to keep it totally down low. So, and he did not want to come to New York. So I said, fine. So I called a friend of mine who runs a company called UVI. They make really great plugins, and they had a store in Paris. And I said, hey, can I use your demo room for an afternoon? And he said, yes. So I went and finished my mix into the UVI demo room in Paris. And the reason why I did that is because I knew they had SM9s. So at least one variable was gone. Like the speaker, I knew very well since I helped design the speaker. I know how it sounds intimately there, but I didn't know the room. So the room was way off compared to my room because it was not designed to be a mixing room. It was a showroom for plugins and synths. But between the headphones and the SM9s, I was able to tune out the room because I know what my headphones sound like. I know what SM9s sound like. And so I was able to imagine what the room would be. And what I would do is I would mix most of the time on headphones, and I would listen on speakers very quietly for balance for vocals. Because that's the one thing you can't really do on headphones very well yet is really place vocals on headphones is a guaranteed failure. But you can do it on speakers because it's great for that. And playing them very quiet allowed me to remove the room as much as possible from the equation, because if you don't excite the room too much, then you get more of the speaker and less of the room. So that's what I would do. But most of the time, very honestly, what I do is I go mix elsewhere. Then I bring the sessions back, and then I do a quick check here. The room is the most important thing by far. And so
yeah, keeping the monitors really low is kind of the big key there. It's a good
keeping the monitors low when you're not sure what's going on is the key to not make mistakes. Yeah. So you work on your headphones, either Spirit Pros. For me, it's Focal Spirit Pros, Focal Spheres, or the Sennheiser's HD600s. That's pretty much it as far as I'm concerned. I know Andrew works with the old 7506s, Sony's. Tony showed up here mixing a record, and he pulled out a pair of 600s. So these tend to be, not 650s, the HD650s are not good, but the 600s are great. But those, they die very quickly because the drivers are very fragile, so you have to stock up on drivers. I replace my drivers once a year, literally. So it's $100 a year rent on those headphones that I already paid $400 to buy. But that's the guarantee that what I hear is what I get, and that's priceless. But yeah, pair headphones is the only solution there, and you know, as quiet as possible, so that you don't have problems with the room.
How about reference mixes? Do you use those to kind of get used to it?
That's how you find out that the room sucks. You play your reference mix, you're like, oh wow. And then you ask for a headphone preamp, then they don't have it. I was in a room called Kaleidoscope in New Jersey, tracking Banda Magda for Yarakina, and they had this god-awful, not Genelecs, Dynaudios, big Dynaudios, I think. Dynaudios or Genelecs, just monsters, big things, and then a pair of broken NS10s. And I was like and they were not physically broken, but they were like so beat. So I said, you know, the NS10s, I can't track a record on NS10s. That's against the rules. So I listened to those big monsters, and I was like, wow. People use this. I'm like, this explains a lot. So I found out with my reference mixes, right? So then I said, okay, well, you know, it's okay, it's fine. I'll use those for like super quiet. I said, and it was a big, gigantic API console. I was like, where's the headphone amp? And they were like, we don't have a headphone amp. There's no headphone amp on this API. I'm like, how do people listen to headphones? They don't. You mean people come here, freelance engineers come here, listen to these monitors, and are fine with it? Yep, like, impressive. So I said, well, how about we run through, like I basically used a CD recorder. They had a CD recorder, which tells you how up to date that studio was. I used the headphone out of a Tascam CD recorder, which I felt digital from the monitor output of Pro Tools, because I did that with a mic cable because they didn't have an AES cable. So I went to the live room, got a mic cable, took the enclosure out of the HDIO, connected it into the Tascam input, turned the Tascam on, it worked. I was so happy. I put that thing on input, and it had an input function, otherwise I would have had to record a CD the whole time. I put it on input, and I used the headphone out of the CD recorder to be able to hear on headphones what was going on for the whole session. And I have an extension cord that was like 18 feet long to go all the way to this headphone recorder. Every time I wanted to change the volume, I had to walk over there and change the volume and then come back and trip over the cable, of course, otherwise it's no fun. I don't think I ever went back to that studio. Yeah, come to think of
Sounds
it,
like a great place. Yeah.
I don't think I recommended it either. Oh, and there was a dude, this is the best part. For the whole session, the assistants were so sweet, so nice. There was an assistant next to me, and I would be like on the console, I would be going like this. I said, and I would be like going for a switch. It would be like, and I would be like this, and he was like, oh, wait, and he would go. He said, okay, go ahead. And then I would be, and then it would work. So whenever my hand would go near something, he would say, wait, and then he would exercise the switch for me so that it would work before I hit the switch. Very sweet. Very broken. Very, very broken. Never went back. Next question. They're in Jersey. They're great.
Cool. So next question is from Alexandra in Brazil. And he says, my question is about gain structure. I understood that it's better to hit some plugins around -20 or -18 dB, but I think, should I think about this in dB full scale, peak, or RMS? Because if my snare, for example, is around -18 RMS, the peak will be in the -6 dBFS range.
That's all about RMS. Here's the deal. That's all about RMS. It's also about listening. So if you heard that, great. Say, for example, we talk about a Pultec emulation, right? The companies like Waves or UA go and model an actual Pultec, spend a lot of time and energy modeling this piece of gear that has a 600 ohm input impedance and output impedance, and that is designed to work at analog levels. And when those units were designed, you know, the maximum level, if you got 20 dBu out of a piece of gear, was like a really hot piece of gear, right? Most of the gear was, your average level was +4 dBu, right? So when you switch to digital and you model that piece of gear, the gain stage of those plugins is actually, if it's a model, the gain stage of the plugin is really designed to be, you know, metrosexual in level. You can't be like Hulk. You have to be nice if you want to hit that plugin where it was modeled to sound good at. Otherwise, you're just pushing it really hard. Maybe that's the sound you like. You know, you could put the UAD Pultec Legacy on your 2Mix and push it, and you get that certain sound, but that's not the sound of a Pultec originally. If you're going to use a Sonox EQ or a Sonox compressor, you can hit it really hard because it's purely digital and it doesn't care. It reacts differently, but it doesn't care. So it's not like it's worse, better or worse. It's just a different, just a different sound. So yes, in general, it is intelligent to gain stage in a way where your RMS levels hit the gear you're using at its sweet spot. Vintage gear was +4 dBu, which is -18 dB full scale, and that is measuring average levels, not peak levels. So you're correct. Your snare, if your snare has a -18 dB average level full scale, your peak would probably be 8 dBs over that if you have a good crack on it, and that's okay. That's why that's the headroom. That's what the headroom is for. The headroom is for the peaks over your average, right? So you have to constantly watch your average. In Pro Tools, I personally look at the K-14 meter, because you know it gives me a decent idea of where we're going. Plus, remember the question from about the levels from Elmo. -14-ish is an interesting area to work at because that's what people are going to listen to music at. So say if your entire life hangs around -14, and if you do referencing in real time with Spotify, you're in the ballpark. It's nice, right? So you pick an RMS level that is going to be your reference level. If you hit a piece of gear that was designed to be hit at -18 RMS or -18 dBFS average, and you hit it at -14, nobody's going to die, right? You're just hitting it a little hard. If you start hearing distortion, that's when, you know, maybe somebody's going to die, or maybe that's the sound you like. There is no hard rules. You just have to have principles and stick to your principles so that in times of chaos, you know that you've done everything according to your principles, and whatever is not working is the one thing where you broke your principle. It's just a way to quickly troubleshoot. So say you're putting a pull tech on your 2-mix and it's the last thing you chain before your limiter is at 0 and you're hitting the pull tech at -6 RMS, and you're hearing distortion, you can start looking there first. Save yourself a lot of grief. You know what I mean?
Cool.
It's just a question of principle. But yes, -18 is good and safe. It's hard to clip -18 RMS. Unless you're recording a big orchestra and you have badass mic technique, you're good.
Do you find that most plugins are usually responsive to -18
Yeah.
percent, or do you worry about it?
-18, -14, that's the sweet spot. It works good. I haven't gotten any hindrance. And then there's some plugins that react funny, and you're like, wow, this plugin sounds bad. And you hit it really hard, and you're like, oh, that plugin sounds good because it was designed to be hitting good. Or you hit it too hard, and it sounds bad, and then you're being a little more gentle about it, and you're like, oh, it's starting to bloom. But those concerns are really kind of more advanced concerns. The other thing is, most plugins are voiced loud. Most plugins are voiced loud, especially soft synths. For example, every soft synth I try is way too loud. The first thing I do is take the volume down 6 or 12 dBs from the master. Why? Because they're designed to be tested at Guitar Center. So the dudes who make the plugins, they're like, I want to sell as many plugins as Arturia. And Arturia wants to sell as many plugins as the last Arturia plugin. And so what they do, I don't know if Arturia does that. I have to go check it. They probably all do it. But basically, when they finish their patches, they make sure that the shit is loud as fuck so that when you're in the store and you press a key, you're like blasted with the sound. You're like, whoa, dude. But then you work on it in a production and you use a synth patch on Expand, for example, and then you have a live drummer. Unless you compress the hell out of the live drummer, it'll never come up to the level of the soft synth patch, which is criminal if you ask me. The biggest offender of that is Ultra Beat in Logic. That always killed me. The first beat of the first song, of the first demo, of the first inspiration clips without any gain. Like there's some samples in there that the dynamics of the Ultra Beat plugin, you go poof, and it clips. You haven't even compressed or done anything or raised the fader. It just clips by default. I'm like, come on, people. So the first thing I do is always take all the soft synths down 6 or 12 dBs depending on how obnoxious the designer was. And they all sound better that way too because you have room to go. And you can marry acoustics and electronics at the same time. If all you do is Ableton Live and no human beings are ever harmed in the making of your music, don't worry about it. But the minute you want to say you use all Ableton and you use the built-in refills, and then you want to lay a singer on top of that, and you want to keep your faders at 0, have a good day. It's just not going to happen. Your singer is going to be 12 dBs lower than your snare drum. And so what you're going to do, you're going to compress, limit, and then it's going to sound like, and then people say Ableton Live sounds bad. No, it's just loud. It's unnecessarily loud. There's always time to make things loud later when you grow up.
Cool.
I never grew up myself.
So next question is from Yuli in Dortmund, Germany.
Ah, yeah, Dortmund. I was there.
Recently?
No, I passed through and I went to visit Stefan Hager in Köln 6 years ago.
Nice.
6 years ago.
Nice.
It's not a destination. Cool. That's why it's odd that I was there. I was just visiting.
Passing through. All right, so Yuli's wondering, how do you deal with the annoying latency delays in already fully loaded Pro Tools sessions? He's on a Pro Tools HD rig, and in case you need to record or add new tracks, MIDI or audio later. So he's already in a mix and trying to get some more stuff in. I know you have a cool workaround for this.
It's a major fucking pain in the ass on biblical proportions. It is a disgrace. It's just awful. It's awful. It's broken. It's very broken. So there is really no. Here's how it goes. If all you do is work in stereo, you don't use any buses like stem busing or anything like that, then you're good. You just create your new track and you send it to output 1, 2, and it works like a charm. And for that, it works best and it works better than any other DAW right now. Except maybe the new Studio One stuff, the low latency system in Studio One is pretty awesome. It really truly is buffer independent. In Pro Tools, if you have a Pro Tools HD rig and you use HDX hardware and you all your outputs go to 1-2. You don't do stem mixing. You don't go through buses. It's flawless. It works amazing, which is why we have an HDX rig in every room here. The minute you use a bus, you're screwed because Pro Tools no longer knows that you're trying to record something, and so delay compensates the whole track because Pro Tools no longer tracks where the track is going. So if you put a track in record and you're going through a bus, Pro Tools is confused and still delay compensates the track. So the way to go around that is to remove delay compensation from the track. But if you do that, you can do that by Command clicking on the little blue thing at the bottom there, the delay compensation thing. But if you do that, every time you want to hear what you just did, you got to re-click out. So it's workflow-wise, it's dumb as hell. And you still incur, unless you're using all DSP plugins, you still incur the full delay. They don't have a fast track. Basically, their dual buffer thing is not working. Let's just put it that way. It's working only for people who work in HDX, only with fully DSP plugins and do not use buses, which is a large subset of the population. As long as you use a physical output as the output of your track, you're good to go. So my workaround, and for those of you who don't use Pro Tools, go take a shower or whatever. Here's what I do. I send all my tracks to physical outputs and then I sum analog. So I have 8 stereo outputs and I sum into my Dangerous 2 bus. And when I have a new vocal, I send it to the vocal stem, and the vocal stem has no buses. It goes straight to vocal stem. And if I want to have processing before I hit the 2 bus, I use a master. What you have to know is the masters are not delay compensated because there's no such thing as a free lunch. Consequently, if you're going to use one plugin on the master, you have to use it on all the masters, right? So I have this, when I need to work in a session that I know there will be production all the way to the last second, like the one I'm working on right now, what I do is instead of using my stem mixing with that you may or may not know with 8 buses and processing on the buses in Sans for the parallel processing, I don't use that. I can't use that because if I use that, then I cannot add more stuff easily. So what I do is I use 8 masters that incur no latency and that don't confuse Pro Tools. And now I'm able to actually record straight into Pro Tools, straight into that session with no latency whatsoever. Because Pro Tools knows that I'm recording, because every track is assigned to a physical output, and I use 8 physical outputs, it works like a charm. If you start collaborating with people, they get really confused about that. Say, for example, I work on a session and it's set up that way, and then I'm co-producing with somebody, and I send him back the session for him to be able to work on the session on his home system. I invariably get angry calls. It's like, I can't hear. All I hear is the bass drum. I'm like, yeah, because that's output 1, 2, dude. So it's really intense. Basically, it doesn't work very well unless you're using the software and hardware exactly as directed and exactly as was intended, which you can't blame them. However, I can safely say that it used to work amazingly well 6 years ago. It's just when we switched to HDX, shit broke, and they never fixed it because it took forever for them to be aware of it, because those were the dark years of Avid. So now they're listening a little better and they're aware of it and they're thinking about how to fix it. I don't know how long it's going to take. So long story short. Solution number 1, don't use buses. Just do everything output 1, 2, and then everything will work great. Slightly longer story. You can use distributed stem mixing, but you can't use buses as your receivers for your stems. You can only use masters, and you cannot put any discrepancy, any plugins that will induce any discrepancy unless there's 0 latency, like for example the soft tube, what's it called, FET compressor, has 0 dBs of 0 samples of latency, or the Fab filter Pro Q2 has 0 samples of latency. You can put those on masters because there's no latency, so you will have no phase problems. That's the second one. But then it works if you work by yourself, never interact with anybody else. And then the third thing is when you need to add something to a session that you already have all that shit and it's a big mess, and you don't want to do any of the previous 2. What I do, which sucks, is I create a new track to the right of my master, and it goes to the same output as the master, so that it's in sync. I do all my tracking, and then when I'm done with the tracking, then I fold those tracks back into my system. Of course, when I want to do an overdub, I'm fucked. So there's no really good solution. Oh, and by the way, all that works if you don't use any sands. If you use a sand on a track object that goes to a reverb, and you want to record on that track object, and even if that is going to a physical output, you will still have system latency. Because, you know, let's call that a feature to make sure that you use less effects. How's that?
Okay, so that's all crazy workarounds, right?
The other solution is to print a 2-track and record to the 2-track and then move on with your life. But then the 2-track will have latency if you are using summing.
Right.
So if you're not using summing, if you're all in the box and you're using buses, then what you do is you print stems, or you print the 2 tracks, or you stem the buses out. Because now with Pro Tools, you can commit the buses. Mm-hmm. So you shift click your 8, 10, 12, 15 buses, depending on how insane you are. You're receiving stem buses. You do that, you go make yourself an espresso, you come back, you take those 15 files, you put them in a session. That session should be phase accurate, because Pro Tools is really wonderful that way. There's no phase issues. It's all perfect. And unless you're using a plugin that's broken, there are many plugins that don't report the right number to Pro Tools, and that's why Pro Tools is broken. But most of the time, the plugins are pretty good. And you use those stems, and that way, if you're really loose, you can have just a stereo stem, and then your singer or your triangle player, your kazoo player can record over that stem, and then you re-import that track into your original session. Or if you have a diva, every kazoo player is a diva as far as I'm concerned, then you can print bass drum, drums, bass, guitars, vocals, keyboards. So when the kazoo player wants less vocals, you can do it. But you still do that in a different session, and then you re-import the kazoo track into your main session. No matter how you look at it, it sucks. It's not where we should be in 2018 for such an expensive system. However, it's nice to be able to record a whole band with Q systems in the box, and it works. So, you know, it's odd. Pro Tools went from the best mixing system on earth to being the best tracking system on earth. Isn't that odd? And if you use hardware like an Apollo, I work with Apollos a lot, then it's a non-issue, because you can do your monitoring on the Apollo console. You just have to maintain 2 consoles, which is not that much fun, but it works. Then you have no latency problem. Unless, of course, you're trying to overdub a soft synth, then you're screwed, which is why we have hardware synths. These are wonderful times.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully it gets better. All right. So the next question is from Danny in Montclair, New Jersey, right across from you.
Exotic.
Yeah.
Exotic, Montclair, New Jersey.
Yeah, Montclair. What key approaches and philosophies do you employ to give your mixes excitement and newness to keep them from becoming too documentary? I think this question might be about, how are you kind of keeping fresh with things?
I listen to music every day. I listen to other people's music every day. I always try to find something that sounds better than what I would have done. That's the quest. And then try to figure out how they did it. It's kind of like it's a quest for perfection. So considering what we do for a living, it's pretty much never going to happen, right? So you just try and make things better at all times. Make something that excites you, like something that's really, really special. So the number one thing I do is my kid goes to school in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is a city across the bridge. It's far. So I had to take the subway. So I take these guys, and then I use this piece of shit made by a food company called Apple. And on it is a thing by the devil called Spotify. And so I listen to everything. Like, I'll listen to the top 50 viral in the US, which right now really sucks. I listen to new music discovery based on stuff I heard before. So that's got a little bit of ancillary quality, because Spotify thinks that you only want to hear stuff you heard before, right? Or in the style of what you heard before. This is the death of music. But I do that, so I combine different options, or I ask my friends, say, what is it that you listen to? Tell me what's the best record you've heard. Or, that's why I've started doing this series on PureMix where every week I'm going to send you a track for you to listen to, something you probably never thought of listening to. So that you can, do that. And then if you use it on Spotify, maybe you're going to get served more of that. Maybe it'll open your ears. So I do a lot of that. I listen to a lot of that to figure out what's going on, what's cool, what's new, what is it that I haven't heard before, or what is it that I missed back in the day, So I do that. And then at one point, when you get proficient enough technically, the act of mixing is not really about EQs and compression and reverbs. It's really about you able to focus more on the song. And so it's always been like that for me, but the better I got by doing nothing but this every day, the better I was able to just not worry about the electronics so much and worry more about what's coming out of the speakers. And so for me at this point is I really try and, unless it comes down to an instrument, to minimize the amount of tools I use so that they're not in the way, so that the technicalities of the mix are minimal. I can worry more about transitions and does it touch me? Does it feel like emotional? And does it work for me? And I'm always very curious about processes, because maybe there's some new stuff that are coming out that are really exciting, that I should learn, that maybe would save me hours. So I always pay attention. But it's really rare that there's something new that's really that interesting. The good news is that we have way enough tools to make everything sound bananas, and we've had those tools for a long time. They're available and they are affordable now, so that's nice. You can worry less about your converters and your clock, and worry more about the lyrics in the second verse, which tend to be usually a way bigger hindrance on the quality of the track than the quality of your clock. Usually the lyrics of the second verse suck a lot more than your clock sucks. So I don't worry about my clock too much, but I spend a lot of time worrying about the lyrics on the second verse. Or the fact that maybe it would be a good idea to write the bridge before we start producing the song, which seems to be one of the hardest things for songwriters to understand. That's how I keep it fresh.
The next question is, what's a lyric?
Yes. Second verse lyrics are key.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Next one is from Joe Romero. I'm 63 years old. I just started about a year ago mixing with Pro Tools. I really enjoy PureMix, and it's helped me tremendously. I'm a semi-pro musician and have experience in the studio, but know I want to really learn mixing. When you listen to a track for the first time, what do you listen for? I mean, do you listen and think EQ, or maybe listen and think, boy, these vocals are all over the place, I need compression? It says, what does a pro listen to for the first time?
Like I just said, now the first thing I listen to is the song. Well, first I make sure I have all the files. Let's be real. Because half the time, something's missing somewhere. Once I have all the files, I listen to the vocals and the bass, and I listen to see if the song made sense and where they're trying to go, and try to understand what they're trying to do, right? That's my first step. Make sure that the song works, and if it doesn't, before I go automate stuff and do complicated stuff, I'll make sure that the song is the song. So that would be my first thing. Make absolutely sure that the song makes sense to you, and then ask questions if it doesn't. The second thing is fix anything that's broken, because there's nothing more annoying than getting a badass bass, vocal, drum kind of pocket, and then you open the guitars and like all you have is a DI and it's missing, like, it's been somebody recorded the DI with their feet and it's just awful, right? And so you're in this vibe and you're trying to get somewhere, and then poof, now you have to go reamp shit. It's just bad. So then I do a quick run around of fixing whatever I feel is going to be in the way based on my impression of where the song is going to go, right? So I'm not going to try and make the bass super fat if clearly it's kind of like a punk revival and it has to sound like needles in your eyes. I was like, the fact that the bass sound like needles in your eyes is on purpose, let it be. So get a vibe for the song, then fix any broken shit. That's the way I do it. And then try and make music out of it. I very often I get stuff where the music is not yet in the session. There's a whole bunch of choices to be made. there's 100 tracks of this and 50 tracks of that, and there's been a lot of insecurity upstream, and everybody's just dumping that stuff on your lap, and you're supposed to be like making the decisions that they could not make by themselves. So then I spent a lot doing that. But I can tell you that the last thing I think about is EQ and compression. I don't care. That's not the point. So if the vocal is super woolly, then I will fix the vocal tone, then let it be. And I'll fix the bass tone and let it be. But all in the context of one final vision of what I want the song to be. And then I'll do all that. If the bass drum sounds like toothpicks, then I'll find a sample that works and put it in case I need it. Then I'll go from there. And then I'll make music with it. But the first thing I think is not, if the vocals are all over the place, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm just going to quickly do a pass or something to make sure that it sounds like that I can listen to the song without being in pain. And then after that, try and turn it into music. That's more the process, less of the compression EQ. And the fact that you ask is very interesting. It's because it's very hard. These things are hard. It's hard. EQ compression, it takes a while to really get your head around it. And so it's very stressful. And you got to see the forest from the trees. So don't worry about that so much. Just do a pass of that and then let it be, and then come back and think music. And then it gets a lot better. And of course, it's very frustrating when you can't get a vocal to sit. And that still happens to me. Like I'm working on a record right now, a high-profile record for a really high, one of the 2 remaining labels, not the one called Universal. And this is a high-level record for a band that got 3 Grammy nominations for the last one I did with them. It's a big deal. And the vocals are just not well recorded at all. I have a Fab Filter Pro MB multi-band compressor with 2 bands. One, the low band is like a 350, and it can push 8 dBs down at 350 dynamically, and the upper band, so it's at 350 and above, it can be seen pushing up to 5 or 6 dBs, and it has 3 dB of gain. That's how woolly the records were recorded. And I'm like, dude, come on, man. And of course it gets to me, and it's supposed to sound like freaking, David Crosby. I'm like, no, I can't do that. It's just there's going to be a compromise, So of course, when I heard that, the first thing I did, I was like, oh, well, that's a failure. So I put that in to try and salvage the best I could, so that I could hear the song without having that thing bother me so much that I was not able to focus on the song. Then I focused on the song. But the key is to think about the song. That's the key. You're not going to go fix the fact that everything is super roomy if it's kind of like a Tom Waits revival thing. It's supposed to be roomy. Let it be. I don't think that way. You think song first, and the song informs the moves. And then it gets better. Don't stress. The compression thing gets better. EQ thing gets better. 2-mix, 2-bus processing, doesn't matter. All that gets better. It becomes intuitive. You just have to do it. And failure is the way to get to it. So if you're failing, you're doing great.
Cool. Great answer. All right. So last question.
Oh.
This one's coming from Bruce Monroe in New
Hi,
York.
Bruce. In where?
New York.
Great place.
Cool. Okay. So he says, Fab, you've built up an impressive studio business. Back when you were starting out, how long did you mix in an apartment or someone else's studio before you got the nerve and capital to build your own studio? Any advice for new mixers who want to be studio owners?
You don't want to be a studio owner. What's the point of being a studio owner? It's a dumb business. The only reason why I'm a studio owner is because I need a place to mix. I need a place to do pureMix, and I need a place to track. I do a lot of tracking. I produce records mostly these days. I no longer just mix. I only mix the records I produce. It's really rare that I will just mix a record. There's a lot of answers in your question. If you're a mixer, pure mixer, you're not going to go track records, produce records. If you're a mixer, or if you do music that only requires doing vocals, you don't want to be a studio owner. You want to build your room. You want to keep your overhead ultra low. That's what you want to do. Because you want to be able to be flexible, and you want to be doing that U2 records before U2 is U2, and they're called U1, I guess. Baby U2, before they hit and they have $8 to make their record. You want to be able to make that record, and for you to be able to make that record, you cannot have a $20,000 rent every month. You just can't do it, because you won't have time to help people out with their beginning career if you have the pressure of the overhead. So you want to keep your overhead ultra super low, the lowest possible. The lowest possible is bedroom. Now, it's difficult to have people in your bedroom. You want to be able to interact with people. So you have to have a dedicated room so that it's legit, the acoustics are good, and you can start working on your music before your girlfriend gets out of bed, for example, just an example. So I would say have a separate room that's your room, and you keep your overhead the lowest possible. If you're purely a mixer, I would say that would be the number one choice. If I had to start from scratch today, right now, I would have a room attached to my residence, and I would keep it that way, and just a room, and it would have a vocal booth to it, because this always needs to redo vocals, or a shaker or triangle or whatever. And also it's nice if you end up working with somebody to have a separate room so that they can do edits or uploads or stuff like that without listening to the same 4 bars all day long when you're working on something, right? So I would say that would be the number one choice for somebody who solely wants to be a mixer. Now, how long did it take me? Well, here's how it worked. I slept under my console in my bedroom when I was just starting in Paris. I had a console, Tascam, and I slept under it. My bed, literally the head of my bed was under the back of the console, and I had dressed the cables on the side so that I could turn around. And I had a girlfriend who lived there, who crashed the place, and she was not super into cables. So that was that. And then and my little sister lived in the other room, and that was it. And then when I moved to the States, I had a room in my house. Well, my living room became my studio. Then I had a room in my house. Then when I moved to New York, you can't do that because your house is the size of a handkerchief or smaller. And so there's no room to put even anything, right? So I moved to New York, I moved on Bank Street, and then I rented a room in this very building. That was my first room in this building. And the rent was $1,500 a month, which was killing me. Then I was making records, like trying to get things to go. And one of the guys who had another room in the basement heard my stuff and said, "Hey, I like the way your stuff sounds. You want to be my studio mate?" And I'm like, "Studio mate, partnership, let's rent." Absolutely. So I went downstairs with him, and my rent went down to $300 a month. And that was a miracle. And I still owe this man to this day the flexibility that allowed me to build my career in New York, because my rent was $300. And so with $300, even if I only had half the time in there, or I had a third of the time in there, at $300, I was able to do songs for free. I was able to do songs for $100 because I didn't have to make that much money. I had my home rent, and then I had an extra $300 overhead. So that basically allowed me to network and give people samples of what I could do for them, and really do great. And then that man got the Paul Simon tour, and so he disappeared for a year, still paid his share of the rent because he's a gentleman. And then when he came back, he gave me the keys to the studio, and he said, "Here, gift. The room is yours now." A room he had built himself. He gave it to me. That was pretty amazing. And so my rent tripled. But it was still $900 a month, and I had full access to the studio full time. So now I could work nonstop, which I started doing, and I was able to make rent. It was difficult, but I was able to make rent, and then it grew from there. And now we have 5 rooms here. And that happened out of necessity, because the rent goes up, and then the room is limited, right? So if you can charge more for the room that you pay for rent, it's cool. When the rent augments, then you have to find another room so you have more volume so that you can pay for the stuff. And also we have partners here who do their own business. So everything is kind of amortized. But if I were to start today, would I build Flux from scratch? From scratch? Absolutely not. The only good reason to build Flux from scratch is the networking. Meaning that I'm here and Paul McCartney is in the lounge and I go make a cup of coffee and I bump into Paul McCartney. I'm like, hi, Paul. How you doing today? That's nice. But to get to this level where Paul McCartney comes to your studio, it is such an unbelievable amount of grief that I don't think this is a complete fluke, and I don't know it would be reproducible today without either a vanity project for somebody with a lot of money who just wants to drop $5 million into making a studio and doesn't care if they're making them back or not, or just tapping into an existing situation. You know, Pat did it, who's a legendary New York guy who did a lot of stuff with David Byrne and stuff like that. Just kind of like got a partner and they took over what used to be Skyline, which used to be Chunking, Midtown, and then it fell apart. Now it's called I forget the name, but anyway, Reservoir it's called. And so it's Midtown. They took an existing shell, they put their gear in it because they're seasoned engineers, they've had gear forever, and they have their own clientele. So basically, it's a public studio, but you can't really book it because they're working there with their own clientele full time. So you know what I mean? But a commercial studio in New York, there's a reason why there's no more. Like there's us, Flux. There's a bunch of dudes in Brooklyn. Some of them are good, some of them mostly using their grandparents' money to live the dream. Avatar is now a school at this point. Berkeley bought it. There's a downtown, but it's almost private to downtown publishing people or super high level label people who want to be close to Josh Deutsch. Then there's insert silence here. So it's very difficult business where the laws of the state are against you. The real estate dynamic of the city is against you. Everything is basically against you unless you own the real estate. And if you own real estate in New York, you should call. We'll talk.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I think that does it for our questions. I've got a couple housekeeping things I want to go over with everybody. So first up, I want to make sure that you guys all know about the Pure Mixers Facebook group. Fab's been doing his weekly emails lately. We just started that up, and he mentions at the bottom of that you can join the Facebook group. And Fab's on there, John Paterno's on there, most of the Pure Mix mentors, and they always chime in and answer everybody's questions. So if you have a question you didn't get to today, you can probably hit Fab up on the Facebook group, and time allowing, he'll try and get to that.
If I don't answer on the Facebook group, please don't be upset. Same with Paterno or Andrew Sheps or any. It's hard to do everything, and so to be able to be relevant and really be able to share the knowledge with you guys, we have to be making records. And making records is a time-consuming proposition, and it's a burst thing, you know. So right now I know that I'm booked until November, and it's insane to think that I'm booked until November. It's ridiculous, but they're records I want to do, so I'm doing it. I'm writing the stuff to share information with you guys weekly. I'm doing the Q&As. We're gonna shoot. I think I can say that we're going to shoot like 8 videos here next week to share knowledge with you guys, some mixes, some techniques, some tips and tricks, really cool stuff that you guys have been asking for, and then it's going to get posted. So the Facebook thing is like, I try, and we all try to chime in the best we can. But if we don't chime in, it's not because we don't care. It's because it's not physically possible to add another hour on top of all the private emails and all the private help that we give, because a lot of people just hit me up directly, and I know a lot of people hit John and Andrew privately, and we try to get to it as much as possible. So don't be offended or upset if we don't get an answer right away, or maybe the answer falls through the cracks. There's only so much human being can do, but it's all in good faith, and we're really trying to help the best we can. So we discussed with Mark and Guillaume that we would do these Q&As more often because I can block the time and it's more open and everybody benefits from the answers. So we're going to do that monthly, right? Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Monthly.
Yeah, monthly Q&As.
And then, so that's cool. And so prep your questions. We keep the backlog of questions, and then we're going to keep answering the questions. We may even do like Q&As with a couple engineers, or do longer ones to get through more questions, or we'll do offline answering of the questions if necessary. We'll do the best we can. We put all the energy we can into it. But understand that for us to be relevant to you guys, we have to be doing it every day, so that we know what the problems you're going to hit down the line, so we can help you not hit those problems. That's the spirit.
Yeah, great. Speaking of Q&As, the next one is actually going to be with Andrew Sheps, and that's for everybody that participated in the Red Hot Chili Peppers mixing contest last month, which also you guys have until midnight tonight to turn in your mixes on that. So if you're still tweaking the vocal, just turn it in. I'm sure it's great. So yeah, that'll be the date for that Q&A will be announced pretty soon here. We're still coordinating with Andrew, and we have to listen to all the mixes. We had over 130 come in, I think. So it's kind of a lot of work to go through. So yeah, that's the next Q&A. The next thing that we're doing is we want to hear some of your most challenging recordings. So if you've got a session where you've been dealing with harsh microphones, cheap condensers, or somebody recorded the kick drum from 12 feet away, we want to see the session and hear it. Fab is looking into doing a series where he's going to be fixing tracks as we go through. And that's one of the most requested things that we get from you guys is something like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You get it and it's immaculately recorded, but you want to hear how to make the tracks that you're working with in your home studio sound better. So if you've got something that you think qualifies, definitely send it in. There's a link in the Pure Mixers Facebook group for that, and I believe we send it out in the newsletter as well. So that'll take you to a type form. You'll answer some questions, and then it'll tell you how to upload your file to me so I can check it out. Next on the list is this month we're doing our most popular giveaway ever. We've got over 30,000 entries to this thing already, and it's for a FabFilter Pro Total Bundle. That includes every plugin that FabFilter makes, and there's a lot of great ones. Fab was talking about a lot of them today. So definitely head over to the giveaway page, enter into that contest, and make sure you get a chance for that. The next thing is we just concluded the Red Hot Chili Peppers mixing contest, but we've got another one to go right on the heels of it, and that's going to be a mixing contest with Daryl Thorpe. So it's going to be the same situation as Andrew Sheps' mixing contest, where you guys are going to do your mixes. We're going to narrow it down to about 10 of them, and then Daryl Thorpe is going to decide on the winner and do a live Q&A session so you can ask him questions about some of the problems that you might have had while you were doing the mix. So that's going to launch next week. Keep an eye out for it. And finally, we have a huge video announcement for you. This is going to launch on Wednesday. We just finished a mixing video with Chris Lord-Alge doing the Daughtry song It's Not Over, and we've got a trailer for you guys to watch on that.
Chris Lord-Alge is one of the most renowned mixing engineers in the world. His style can be heard on records from legendary artists such as U2, Aerosmith, Prince, Bruce Springsteen, James Brown, The Who, Green Day, and dozens more. His plugins are some of the most used ever created, and his process is lightning fast. Now's your chance to sit at the console with one of the largest innovators of the mixing craft and see the process he uses to help artists sell millions of records across the globe. See how CLA uses techniques like parallel compression and parallel EQ to bring elements of the mix directly in your face, create excitement in snare drums, craft punchy and powerful guitars, identify and emphasize the special moments of a mix, and learn why he never adds reverb to direct microphones. In this 2-hour pureMix.net exclusive, watch Chris craft the mix from the Grammy Award-winning song It's Not Over from the fastest-selling debut rock album of all time by Daughtry. Once you've seen how Chris does it, download the stems and try it yourself.
Since everyone thinks that Chris Lord-Alge uses more compressors than God, and I have them, doesn't mean I use them all. In this scenario, I listen with my ears and say, does that need a compressor or does it not? Well, in this situation, the drums have zero compression except the kick has a slight amount just to kind of flatten the dynamic.
Watch the one and only Chris Lord-Alge mix Daughtry.
So here's how it's done here in my studio on my SSL.
Only on pureMix.net.
This coming Wednesday, and that session is, we're going to include the stems from that session with it. So you'll be able to download the Daughtry stems that Chris Lord-Alge worked on and take a stab at the mix for yourself. So that's all I've got for right now. Lots of really great stuff coming up to PureMix soon. And Fab, thank you so much for taking the time today to answer a bunch of questions.